My fiancé has a female friend. He's liked her for 10 years, and when drunk, he confessed, I'm afraid that if I confess, we won't even be able to stay friends. I wasn't angry. I quietly bought a ring and ordered the wedding dress. My fiancé privately complained to his friends that I was pressuring him into marriage, joking that he would leave me hanging at the wedding. Until he realized that this wedding had nothing to do with him. Let's go with this one. In the bridal store, I finally chose the dress. The sales assistant asked, should I ask your fiancé for his opinion? All the other girls in the store were accompanied by their boyfriends, but I was alone. I smiled and said, it's fine. He'll like it. While waiting to pay, I got a notification on my phone that one of the posts I followed had been updated. The post was titled Loving a Girl for 10 Years, and it was posted by a guy. There were countless comments urging him to confess, come on, confess already. He replied, I can't. I'm afraid that if I confess, we won't even be able to stay friends. The person who posted it was my fiancé, Jacob. When I got home, Jacob was drinking with his friends. There was only one girl in the group of guys. She had a hot body and wore black stockings, sitting cross-legged on the couch without a care in the world. I knew her. Her name was Ella. She was Jacob's good friend. You guys, whoever starts dating someone, you better let me check them out first, got it? Immediately, someone teased, Jacob's girlfriend is about to get married, right? Ella's smile froze for a moment. She kicked Jacob with her foot, wearing black stockings. Wow, you're something, huh? No wonder you've been avoiding us lately. You're getting married? Prioritizing romance over friendship. Jacob lazily leaned back on the couch, half avoiding, that's not true. Don't be shy. If you really are getting married, I'll definitely get you a big gift. Ella smiled as she patted Jacob, but then her eyes seemed to redden. She grabbed the wine bottle and took a few big gulps. Jacob looked at her, stop drinking. Mind your business. You've had enough. Who the hell are you to tell me? I'm drinking, and you can't stop me. Ella said this, but as if the alcohol was taking effect, she gradually slumped onto Jacob's shoulder. Jacob, she murmured, as if trying to say something. Jacob couldn't hear clearly, so he lowered his head and put his ear close to her lips. The atmosphere became incredibly ambiguous in that moment. But then, there was a loud bang. It was me opening the door. The whole room fell silent for a moment. I didn't look at any of them. I just put my bag down, changed my shoes, and went into the study. I didn't say a word. Outside, I could hear voices. Someone said, Jacob, Ruby seems upset. They thought I was angry and giving Jacob the cold shoulder. Jacob probably thought the same, because he spoke with an annoyed tone. Don't mind her. He played a song through the speakers, and the atmosphere in the living room slowly became lively again. Ella had fallen asleep on the couch, and Jacob took off his jacket and covered her with it. Someone said to Jacob, Jacob, why don't you ask Ruby to come join us? Jacob's voice was calm, no need. She's socially anxious. I do have social anxiety, more precisely, anxiety disorder. When I speak in crowds, my hands shake and I sweat. So my life doesn't involve much socializing, everything revolves around Jacob. He used to gently kiss me and say, Ruby, I'm so lucky to meet a girl who's so completely into me. But now, those once cherished traits had become flaws. You guys don't understand. I really wish she would go out and socialize more, have some friends. Jacob complained as he took a sip of his drink. Someone joked, Ruby is so pretty, if she went out and socialized, I'm sure tons of guys would be asking for her number. Then she wouldn't have time for you. Jacob chuckled, let her go. She can meet other men, as long as she stops clinging to me all the time. He said it casually, as if he was certain I wouldn't go. My anxiety disorder requires me to take medication regularly, so there's no way I could attend any social events. The so-called fairness of both parties being allowed to have friends of the opposite sex was really just to give him the freedom he wanted. But it didn't matter. I didn't care anymore. I took out my iPad and started sketching the wedding invitation design. In the top left corner, I wrote the initials of the bride and groom in cursive. The bride was me, Ruby. But the groom wasn't Jacob. Once I finished designing this invitation, I would marry the person I wanted to marry when I was 16. Jacob thought I was giving him the silent treatment. But he didn't try to comfort me. That night, he slept alone. I worked on my design until midnight, and during a break, I checked my phone. There was a people you may know suggestion. It was Ella. The latest post was from 30 minutes ago. In the video, she was holding a glass of wine, and in the midst of her friends teasing, she kissed Jacob. The caption read, "Childhood friends, but just pure friendship." The setting was my living room, and under the warm yellow light, their silhouettes looked perfect, like a beautiful couple. The comments were flooded with people saying, "Perfect match." There were also a few comments that said, "I can't take this. Just admit it's ambiguous, why say friendship? This world has become something I don't understand." These comments were quickly attacked, and Ella herself responded, "Don't be so obsessed with sex, okay? I kiss both guys and girls like this, and I kiss pretty girls even harder." I don't know why, but I couldn't help laughing. Tears welled up in my eyes. But it wasn't because of Ella or Jacob. It was the word childhood friends that suddenly reminded me of Jonas. I hadn't dared to remember him so seriously in a long time. A white shirt, cold soda, and a rebellious boy's expression under the sun. When he made the final three-point shot, I ran to hug him, and in the roar of the crowd, he blushed. "Hey, this is something only a girlfriend should do." "Why, don't you like it?" I felt a chill run through me. "It's not that. It's just too fast." He fumbled for his phone, hurriedly checking the order. "The flowers I ordered aren't here yet." Later, Jonas bought a car, and the first thing he did was put a label on the passenger seat, "Ruby's seat." He also bought a small rabbit seat holder. He patted the rabbit's silly little head. "When Ruby isn't around, you have to keep her seat, don't let anyone else sit there." We were together for 7 years, and every year, Jonas bought a new little rabbit. He said, "Once I have 7, I can summon the dragon and then I'll ask for a promotion." He didn't lie to me. In the 7th rabbit's little apron, there was a large diamond ring. That was the last gift Jonas left for me. He didn't get to give it to me in person. In the end, I received it from the police. The rabbit with the blue apron was mixed in with the wreckage from a car accident. Everything else was soaked in dark blood. But the rabbit, its white fur and bright smile, was untouched. The police said Jonas had hidden it in his arms before he died, protecting it well. Now, that rabbit, along with the others, sat on my bedside table. I walked over and gently stroked their little heads. "Jonas, I miss you so much. How could I miss you like this?" Suddenly, my hand froze. "No, he's not here. The rabbit in the blue apron isn't here." A chill swept over me, and I felt dizzy. I blinked and realized. The sheets and blanket were all wrinkled, and there were 2 strands of chestnut-colored hair on the pillow. Someone had slept in my room last night. But I didn't care. I just wanted to find the little rabbit Jonas left for me. I frantically searched the house and finally found it in the kitchen trash can. The little rabbit was mixed with food scraps, its body dirty and with a black heel mark on it. It was from a high-heeled shoe. Blood rushed to my head, and I rushed to Jacob's bedroom door, banging on it loudly. A few seconds later, he opened the door. "Come to make up?" He smiled lazily. Jacob thought I was here to reconcile. It used to be like this: whenever I got angry, he didn't care, and in the long silent standoff, I'd always be the one to back down first and knock on his door to apologize. But this time, I held up the rabbit. "What's going on here?" Jacob's smile disappeared. He impatiently tried to shut the door. "How would I know?" I suddenly exploded. Pushing hard against the door, I stared into Jacob's eyes. "Who did you let sleep in my room last night?" "Ella, wasn't it?" Jacob's gaze faltered for a split second. But then he became irritable and impatient. "Yes, so what? She was drunk, and it's not safe for a girl to go home alone at night." There was a sharp sound in the air. I slapped Jacob across the face. Jacob froze. Then his anger flared. "Are you crazy? There's nothing between us. If there was, I would have let her sleep in the master bedroom, okay?" I stared at his face for a long while, then slowly lowered my eyes. "Let's break up. Jonas, it was you who told me I had to live happily, that I should find someone who loves me the way you did, but now I understand. No one is like you. Say that again? I heard Jacob's voice. He was really angry now. We're breaking up. I repeated, my face expressionless. I stopped looking at Jacob's face and turned away, heading to the bathroom with the rabbit and starting to scrub it clean. As I washed, tears started falling. Outside, I could hear Jacob's voice, Ruby, are you fucking crazy? A rabbit's only worth so much. Should I buy you 10 more, is that better? Inside, the sound of water rushing drowned out his words. Jacob's patience had completely worn out. He turned around, slammed the door, and left, leaving me alone at home. It took me a long time, but I finally cleaned the rabbit. I hung it out on the balcony, and in the clear, sunny wind, it gradually became snow-white, fluffy, and warm. It would get better. Then I, too, should be the same, right? I found a place online for a long-term rental and packed up my things. Not much, just a small bundle that could fit in a tiny bag. The only thing that needed to be boxed up was the row of rabbits on my bedside table. Rabbits with bows, wearing jerseys, wearing sunglasses. The only one that made me hesitate was the rabbit in a spacesuit. Of all the rabbits, it was the only one Jacob had bought for me. At that time, we weren't together yet, and Jacob put a lot of effort into chasing me. He came from a wealthy family, and whenever he liked a girl, he would throw money at her and usually win her over. Except for me. The luxury gifts he bought for me, I returned without a second thought. When he took me to fancy restaurants, I would quickly return the favor. In the end, I don't know how, but he found out I liked this series of little rabbits. At the time, the rabbit in the spacesuit was about to be released, a limited edition. He flew to Shanghai overnight for the launch event, stood in a crowd for over 10 hours, almost got into a fight with someone, and finally grabbed the last one. When I found him, he was sweating, with scratches on his face, but he waved at me through the crowd, shouting, "Look. Ruby. What's this?" His tall figure stood out in the crowd, his smile as bright as sunlight. He really reminded me of Jonas. That day, I couldn't hold back and cried, hugging the rabbit. Jacob stood by, awkwardly trying to comfort me. Don't cry, it's just a little scratch, I'll buy you every one of them from now on." In that moment, my thoughts drifted back to an afternoon years ago. I was sitting on a bench in the university campus with Jonas, basking in the sun. He suddenly asked me, "What would you do if I got a terminal illness?" I'm saying if. Then I'd send you off first, and then follow you, happy now? No, Jonas pulled me into his arms, his expression suddenly serious. "Ruby, listen to me. You need to live well, happily. You need to find someone who loves you like I do. You also need to love him well, because loving is happier than being loved. I want to see you happy. Only when you're happy will I be happy in heaven." Jonas, do you know? The year after you left, when Jacob raised that rabbit in the crowd, I thought that person had finally appeared. I would live on, trying to put everything related to you in my memories, and make room in my heart for him. I would try to be happy. But now I understand. No one is like you. There will never be anyone like you. I placed the rabbit in the spacesuit into my bag. It grinned at me, cute and mischievous. "I'm returning you now," I whispered, stroking its head. Jacob wasn't picking up my calls. Fortunately, he only frequented a few places, and I found him at a KTV private room. When I entered, his friends greeted me. "Ruby's here. Ruby, sit here." They cleared a seat next to Jacob for me. Jacob was staring coldly at the screen, ignoring me. He thought I was here to apologize, so he was waiting for me to back down. I didn't go over. I sat at the farthest seat. "I'm fine here." Jacob frowned. Ella, sitting next to him, smiled and nudged him. "She's angry, you better go apologize." Jacob didn't look at me or her. "Order a song, whose turn is it next?" He was deliberately ignoring me. Jacob knew I'd get anxious in crowds, so when he took me out, he would always sit next to me, worried he might not take care of me. Now, he was doing this on purpose, waiting for me to have an anxiety attack and come crawling back to him. Ella laughed. "You, kid, have a terrible temper. Don't you know how to cherish women?" She walked over to me, holding a drink. "Jacob's a typical straight guy, don't take it personally, honey." She affectionately hugged me, and in the next moment, the drink suddenly tipped over. The entire glass of cold whiskey splashed all over me. I was wearing a white top, and my chest was drenched, looking utterly awkward. I was just trying to be nice. Why did you push me? Before I could speak, Ella had already jumped in. She staggered backward, bumping into the cabinet behind her and clutching her waist, looking like she was in pain. The guy next to her chimed in, "Jacob, your girlfriend's not cool. You two are fighting, and she's taking it out on Ella?" I turned and stared at him. There was a scar on his forehead. I recognized him. Cody. He was Ella's lackey back in high school. Cody looked uncomfortable under my gaze, swallowing nervously. Jacob. Jacob had already walked over. He helped Ella up. "Did you hurt yourself? Does it hurt?" Ella's eyes were red, holding back tears. "I'm fine, just go calm down your girlfriend." Jacob suppressed his anger, turned to look at me. "Apologize." I didn't speak, just stared at him quietly. "Apologize." His voice grew louder. Ella tugged at his sleeve. "Hey, don't argue over me." She was trying to intervene, but she stood behind Jacob, looking smug. Jacob didn't know that when I first arrived, I had run into Ella in the hallway. She looked at me, smiling. "I really didn't expect a cheap woman like you to hook Jacob." She added, "He's been in love with me for 10 years. Do you believe if I wave my finger, he'll ditch you and come back to me?" Now, standing behind Jacob, her eyes were fixed on me. Her face said it all. She had won. Jacob repeated, "I'll ask you one last time. Will you apologize?" The music from the next room pounded against my eardrums. I rarely spoke in public, and I always felt anxious when I had to speak in such places. But this time, I suddenly smiled. "I should apologize. Ella, and you, Cody. You both owe me an apology. I wasn't born with anxiety. Before I turned 16, everyone said Ruby was a little son, bright, lively, and warm. When did things start to change? It was probably when my mom took me along to remarry Ella's father. It was just an ordinary blended family, but for some reason, rumors began spreading in school that my mom had climbed her way up as a mistress. The rumors got worse, and soon, I was labeled as the daughter of the other woman. I tried to explain, but no one believed me. All kinds of versions started circulating on the school forum. "Did you know? Ruby's mom has been teaching her all the tricks to be a mistress. No wonder Ruby looks so flirtatious whenever she talks to boys, it must be in her blood. You know, Ruby's always in and out of the principal's office, and then she suddenly got the top scholarship. Could it be? The thought is terrifying. The principal's so much older, she'd really go that far? It runs in the family. Can't catch wolves without sacrifices, right? She'd do anything." Bullying followed. In class, whenever I was called on to speak, there'd be sneers and giggles. During performances, someone would aim a laser pointer at my eyes from the audience. Whatever I said got written down and blown up on the forum, analyzed from every angle. Gradually, I stopped speaking altogether. I avoided talking to anyone and attended classes in complete silence. That's when Jonas appeared. He dragged the guy with the laser pointer out of the crowd and punched him in the face. People rushed to break it up, and that guy's friends took advantage of the chaos to gang up on Jonas. Blood quickly appeared on Jonas's face, but he didn't seem to care. He held that instigator down, calmly, one punch after another, as if he was focusing on a problem in an international competition. It turned into a big deal. That boy's dad, a VP at some corporation, went straight to the principal, demanding an explanation. Jonas lost his shot at the national award and was disqualified from school honors. For the first time, this model student received a disciplinary record. When he finally walked out of the principal's office, a crowd gathered around him, girls included. Ella was there too, holding tissues and saying tearfully, "Jonas, your face is bleeding, it's so heartbreaking." Jonas pushed her away and walked toward me. I lowered my head, trying to avoid him, and turned to leave. I hadn't spoken to him in a long time, worried that my reputation would drag him down. But then he grabbed my wrist. "Avoiding me again, little sweetheart?" Jonas's voice was low, and there was a hint of grievance in it. When I looked back, I saw the wounds on his face, and tears suddenly spilled from my eyes. don't cry, it doesn't hurt. He smiled gently. If a few scrapes make you finally pay attention to me, then it's worth it. In the KTV room, I looked at Ella, then shifted my gaze to Cody. And you too, was it fun shining that laser pointer in people's eyes? If no one had stopped you, I could have been blinded. If anyone should be apologizing, shouldn't it be you too? Cody lowered his head, avoiding my gaze. But Ella just gave me a quick, flickering look before standing up. What's wrong with you? Who said I posted anything? Do you have any proof, or are you just paranoid? She glanced at Jacob, who was standing nearby, and gave a mocking smile. I get it. You're just jealous of me and Jacob, so you're trying to smear me in front of him, right? Jacob, do you believe her? Ella looked over at Jacob. Jacob's face was expressionless. He didn't say a word. Understood. Ella gave a pale smile. All guys fall for this act, huh? Fine, I'll apologize to your precious girlfriend. She wobbled over to me, possibly tipsy, and stumbled on her high heels, falling straight to the floor. Jacob rushed forward to catch her. Let go of me. Ella's eyes were red as she struggled, voice choked with tears. Why do you still care? Haven't you already decided to believe her? I believe you, Jacob said, not even sparing me a glance. Who needs your trust? Get lost. Ella kept pushing Jacob away, but then buried herself in his arms, sobbing softly. Usually so proud and fierce, Ella rarely showed such vulnerability. Jacob felt a pang of sympathy. He stroked her head and murmured, I've known you for years. Don't I know the kind of person you are? Ella's hand stayed on her ankle. Jacob noticed and asked gently, Did you sprain it? Ella sniffed, feigning toughness. It doesn't hurt. Don't be stubborn. Jacob picked her up. Hey! What are you doing? Ella protested, trying weakly to resist. Put me down. Quit fussing, or you can hop your way to the hospital. Fine, I'll hop. Ella retorted, clinging to his neck, despite her words. She turned to look at me, mouthing something under the dim KTV lights. Bitch. The same word she used to call me back in those school forum posts. Jacob, I called his name. Jacob stopped. I took the keys to his place from my bag, along with a little stuffed rabbit in a spacesuit, and placed them on the table. The sound made him pause, his back stiffening ever so slightly. But then he walked forward without looking back. Jacob's perspective. When Jacob walked out of the KTV with Ella in his arms, he stood outside in the night for a while. The driver's not here yet? Ella muttered, displeased. Jacob said nothing, his chest rising and falling subtly. It suddenly hit him, he was standing here, waiting for Ruby to come after him. He knew Ruby too well, she wouldn't really want to break up. Jacob had seen this before. Girls would mention breaking up during arguments, but what they wanted was for the guy to be the first to apologize, to comfort them. But why should he be the one to give in? He'd always been the one pursued by girls, always the one to end things on his terms. Never once had he been dumped. He thought he'd been more than generous with Ruby. Anything she wanted, he gave her. Even after exhausting days at work, he'd still muster the patience to be with her, trying to make her happy. Why was this happening? He didn't even like her that much. Probably just didn't want to see her cry. Ruby was so soft and sweet, like a little rabbit, never making a sound even when she cried, just with red-rimmed eyes. Whenever that happened, it felt like little claws scratching at his heart, bringing a delicate, nagging pain. A moment ago, he'd decided that if Ruby shed a tear or softened her tone, he'd choose her. But she'd pushed it, time after time, from home to the KTV. This time, he wouldn't back down. Jacob stood there in the night, thinking, though he could never spoil Ruby again, if she really came after him now, he'd give her one more chance. After all, she really loved him, and without him, who knows how she'd go on. So he waited a little longer. But Ruby didn't come. The temperature dropped in the late hours, and the cold seeped into his thin shirt, igniting a sudden anger. Fine, not coming? Then don't come, ever. Jacob strode off, pulling Ella into the car. The whole ride, he barely heard a word she said. All he could think was one thing. She'll regret this. Jacob stayed in the hospital for days on purpose. Ella seemed to be playing along, What started as a sprained ankle quickly turned into claims of headaches and chills. She'd always say she felt unwell, but then insist she was fine, urging Jacob to hurry back home to Ruby. Jacob had a temper. The more Ella said it, the more irritated he got. Home, my ass. We broke up, didn't you hear? Even so, he'd secretly open his phone, checking for new messages. There were some, but none from her. The last message in Ruby's chat was from before they'd run into each other at the KTV, saying she'd come by to return his things. Jacob didn't believe it for a second. All those lines, "You left something at my place, I need to return your gift to you in person, there's something I want to clear up with you," they were just excuses girls used. In reality, they just wanted to make up, but couldn't bring themselves to say it directly. Still, Jacob was willing to give Ruby a way out. All she had to do was apologize, say a few nice things, and restore his dignity in front of his friends. He'd be willing to go back with her. But Ruby didn't apologize, nor did she say a single word to placate him. Instead, she even left him her house keys. The more Jacob thought about it, the angrier he got. Women shouldn't be spoiled. He'd been too nice to Ruby from the start, pampering her until she became insufferable. With this thought, Jacob raised his glass, took a photo with Ella in the background, and posted it on social media, making it visible only to Ruby. It was his way of getting back at her, a silent declaration: "I never lack female company. If you don't come back, don't regret it." After leaving Jacob, I rented a suite for the long term at a local bed and breakfast. One day, the front desk messaged me, "Miss Ruby, you have a visitor." It was my mother. She wore an expensive outfit, had her hair newly permed, and donned a gemstone necklace. "Why did you move out of Jacob's house?" We hadn't spoken in nearly 10 years. This was the first thing she asked me in all that time. "Do you have any idea who Jacob is?" she said. "His family holds influence in both business and politics, and he's the only child. Do you realize how rare it is for someone like him to take an interest in you? Why aren't you seizing this opportunity?" When I stayed silent, she pressed on, clearly frustrated. "I heard you'd already started picking out wedding dresses and rings to push for marriage. Why hide away now? If you give up over a minor setback, how do you expect to accomplish anything? Listen to me, don't act on impulse. How many wealthy young men actually want to settle down early? Marriage is a business, Ruby, as long as he signs the contract." I interrupted her. "So, back then, was helping Ella just another business deal for you?" She froze. Then, embarrassed, her expression shifted to anger. "Is that how you speak to your mother, Ruby? When have I ever treated you as a business transaction?" I gave a small, bitter smile. "When Ella bullied me, you chose to turn a blind eye. When I gathered evidence to report Ella to the school, you secretly destroyed it. That was the moment I knew I didn't have a mother." She looked as if I'd stabbed her. Her body bent slightly, and she pointed a trembling finger at me. "Everything I did was for your sake. If you'd reported Ella, how would we be able to stay in this family? I've worked so hard to make money, all for you." I spoke calmly. "I don't need your money. The person I loved is gone. What use is money to me?" My mother might have started crying. She was old now, and I was the only family she had left. Yet I refused to forgive her. I went into the inner room, shut the door, and hugged the small stuffed rabbit Jonas had given me. "You're the only one who's ever stood by me, unconditionally. So, apart from you, I want no one else." My mother lingered outside for a long time, then finally left. Before she did, she left me a gift. I'd kept this in case, one day, your stepfather, Ella's dad, wanted to cast me aside, so I could use it as leverage for a bigger share of the assets. But now, it's yours. After she left, I opened the door and saw what she'd left behind. My whole body began to shake. It was an old sandalwood bead bracelet and a USB drive. I picked up the bracelet, still trembling. The cord had broken once and been retied, and I counted 13 beads in total. These bracelets are always crafted with symbolic numbers, there shouldn't be 13 beads. The only explanation was that one had been lost. I knew exactly where it had gone. Among the evidence in Jonas's car accident case was a single, blood-stained sandalwood bead. With shaking hands, I inserted the USB drive into my computer. Inside, there was one photo and an audio file. The photo showed Ella and her father at a temple, her hand adorned with that sandalwood bracelet. The moment I opened the audio file, Ella's voice played. "Dad, help me. I think I hit someone." It was like a bucket of ice water had been dumped over my head. All the blood in my veins ran cold. The karaoke bar was as lively as ever. Outside, the world was filled with injustice, suffering, life, and death. But once you stepped into this place, there was only alcohol, music, and indulgence, a temptation to sink in forever. I pushed open the heavy door to the private room. As soon as I walked in, everyone froze. "Whoa, it's her. Unbelievable. Broke up with him and now she's back to cling on? Jacob's with Ella now, and she's trying to come back as the third wheel? Hilarious." Cody, the loudest of the group, sneered. Ella sat holding a glass of wine, watching with amusement. Ignoring all their stares, I slowly walked up to Jacob. He didn't look at me, nor did he say a word. The dim lights of the room flickered across his face. I said, "Jacob, I'm sorry." He didn't move. Taking a deep breath, I continued, "Will you forgive me? I promise I won't cause trouble anymore. I really can't be without you." A tear slipped down, landing on Jacob's leg. He flinched as if he'd been burned. Just as he turned to look at me, his phone rang. He shot me a cold glance. "Wait here." With that, he stepped out with his phone. Left in a room full of Jacob's friends, I began to feel my anxiety creeping up. Ella sat there, sipping her drink as if I were invisible, until I finally stood up to leave. That was when she grabbed my arm. "Don't go. We're all friends here. Stay and have fun." Ella pressed a glass into my hand. "Cheers." It was a full glass of whiskey, a large ice ball floating inside. Just holding it for a few seconds made my hand numb from the cold. I'd never been able to handle cold drinks. Jacob knew that. Ella knew it too. Seeing me hesitate, Cody complained loudly. "Why aren't you drinking? Not giving Ella any face?" A chorus of taunts followed. "Ella's being so nice to her, and she's slapping her in the face. Jealous, obviously. She's caused so much drama between Jacob and Ella, even splitting up over it. Now she's crawling back." Ella watched me with a smug smile. Her face was beautiful, and her wrist was bare. That bracelet had saved her once, stained with Jonas's blood. She could never wear it again. I tipped my head back and drank the whiskey in one gulp. Ella looked momentarily surprised, then laughed. "Didn't you say you couldn't drink? You seem to be handling it just fine." She started pulling me into games. Surrounded by people, I soon began to shake, and with no experience in drinking games, I lost each round. One glass after another, my mind started to blur. Somewhere nearby, I heard Ella's distant voice laughing. "Cody, how long have you been single?" 2 weeks. "Oh? Feeling lonely yet?" "Lonely? Of course. But these days, it's hard to find a pretty girl. Without makeup, they're all goblins. What do you think of Ruby?" "Ruby's gorgeous, but I don't know if I should. She's Jacob's girl." "Jacob's girl?" "Jacob's never cared about her." "Don't worry, if anything happens, I'll take care of it." Maybe it was the alcohol, but Cody suddenly seemed emboldened. He came over and grabbed my arm. "Well, thanks, Ella." He tried to pull me up from the couch, but almost immediately, I collapsed back down. He pulled me up from the sofa, but almost instantly, I fell back down. A loud crash of a bottle breaking filled the room, followed by Cody's piercing scream. It was Jacob. His face was blank as he held a shattered bottle in one hand and his phone in the other. Cody was lying on the ground, clutching his head and screaming in agony. Ella's face turned pale. "Jacob," she whispered. Jacob ignored Ella and strode over to me. Someone lifted me up, and I fell into a warm embrace. Ruby, are you okay?" I heard a man's anxious voice asking. "I'll be fine, Jonas." As I lost consciousness, I still clutched that ring with the initials engraved on it. J&R. Every letter was more lasting than any diamond. I slept for a long time and had a very long dream. In the dream, Jonas was happily buying a little blue apron bunny and carefully figuring out how to hide the ring in its small pocket. He walked out of the store, filled with endless hope, until a car sped toward him, and everything came to an abrupt halt. Jonas? I called his name as I woke up, drenched in cold sweat. In front of me was Jacob's face. He was looking at me with a mix of concern and worry. But as soon as he saw my eyes open, his expression quickly turned calm and detached. "What kind of nightmare scared you this much?" he asked. I shrank under the covers, my tears finally welling up and spilling down my face. I dreamed. I covered my face, trembling. I dreamed that Jay didn't want me anymore. Jacob's figure froze slightly, then he slowly walked over and pulled me into his arms. "So scared that I'd leave you, yet you still give me such a hard time," he said. "And by the way, I leave you alone for a second, and you down an entire bucket of ice wine? Are you trying to shorten your life?" I hung my head and let him scold me. After a while, I murmured softly, "You told me to wait for you inside. I was afraid if I didn't drink, I'd never see you again." Jacob fell silent, finally muttering, "You're such a fool," before getting up and heading outside for a smoke. A nurse came in to adjust my fore and teased me with a smile, "Your fiancé was so worried about you. He hardly slept at all these past 2 days." "Fiancé?" "He was sitting outside, holding your engagement ring and stroking it over and over," she said with a sigh. "He really cares about you." He was holding the ring Jonas custom made for me. When Jacob returned from his smoke, he saw me staring at the ring on his finger. "What?" he asked. "This doesn't really suit you," I said carefully. Thankfully, he quickly took it off and tossed it to me. "You're right, it's so out of style by now." He pulled out his phone and transferred me some money. "Go pick out a new pair. I like this engraving, keep it the same." "Of course it's beautiful, Jonas and I designed it together." I carefully put the ring away, then looked up at him with a sweet smile. "Does this mean you've agreed to marry me?" Jacob paused, walked over to the balcony in the hospital room, and lit a cigarette. The flame flickered, casting shadows on his face as he muttered, "Yeah, I agreed." The wedding was officially set in motion. Because I was in the hospital for gastroenteritis, most of the arrangements fell on Jacob's shoulders. From the venue to the bouquets, he handled everything with care, often asking for my preferences. Sometimes, I'd almost get the illusion that he genuinely loved me. But it was just an illusion. One day, I brought an invitation to Jacob because a name hadn't been written clearly. Outside the door, I overheard him talking with his friend. Cody was sitting there, head wrapped in bandages, trying his best to please. "Jacob, you're really marrying Ruby? Congratulations, man." Jacob hesitated for a moment before scoffing. "As if. She's so spoiled by now, thinking she can break up and get married whenever she feels like it." "Who does she think I am?" Cody echoed, "Exactly, who does she think you are? Someone she can summon and dismiss at will?" Jacob's face darkened, and he stared at Cody. Cody immediately shut up, terrified. Jacob took a sip of his drink and said, "That's why I need to teach her a lesson, to make her behave." This was his punishment for me. Leaving me at the altar, paying me back for the time I dumped him in front of so many people. I didn't go in. I turned around and left. Jacob came to see me at the hospital late at night. But the room was empty. Jacob panicked. He grabbed a nurse. "Where is she?" The nurse stammered, I don't know. She was here this afternoon." When I arrived at the hospital, Jacob was in a frenzy. Doctors and nurses were all caught in the storm of his anger, scurrying around trying to find me. Jacob was on the phone with his assistant. "Get a car, check the surveillance." "No clearance?" "Who said no clearance?" "Call the police chief." "Jacob." I called him softly. He froze and turned to look at me. I thought he would be angry, but he just ran over and held me tightly. "Where did you go?" he asked, his voice low and trembling slightly. "I went to Jonas's grave. Today was his birthday, and I brought a cake to keep him company. He liked blowing out candles, but hated sweets, so I always ended up eating the whole cake myself. I would complain, celebrating your birthday is going to make me fat. At least this time our birthday tradition didn't have to change." The wind blew out the candle, and I looked at Jonas's picture on the tombstone. "Done making your wish?" "Then I'm eating the cake now." I ate the whole cake, one bite at a time, and sighed, patting my stomach. In the photo, Jonas was still smiling brightly at me. Back at the hospital, I gently patted the back of Jacob's neck. "I just went out for a walk, I'm sorry." The hug seemed to put him at ease. He held me even tighter. "Try running off again, and see what happens," he warned. The doctors and nurses murmured among themselves about how much Jacob loved me. "Mr. Jacob is really terrified of losing Miss Ruby, isn't he?" "Is he? Jacob, are you afraid of losing me, or losing the bride in your runaway wedding charade?" I laughed bitterly inside, but I still wrapped my arms tightly around his neck. Because I saw Ella standing at the end of the corridor. She was staring at us, her eyes filled with venom. I knew Ella was finally panicking. All these years, she'd watched me like a cat watching a mouse, enjoying the game slowly. But now, she finally felt that things were slipping out of her control. Even though Cody had told her that Jacob could never marry me, Ella was still uneasy. Because Jacob seemed too in love with me. The slightest discomfort, and he would leave a company meeting to come home and stay by my side. I'd protest shyly, "The doctor and nanny are here, why come back?" With a stoic expression, he would make me porridge. "Can they compare to me?" I would smile sweetly, sipping the porridge from his hand. Ella called a few times, asking Jacob to go out drinking with her. He declined each time. Frustrated, Ella accused him of putting romance before friendship. He just chuckled, saying, "I've had my fun for over 20 years, now that I'm getting married, it's time to settle down." Then my mom called. She said, Jacob might really make a good husband. For the sake of the evidence she'd given me, I didn't hang up and listened patiently. Mom took a deep breath, trying to convince me. "I know what you're planning, but please think it over. As someone who's been there, I believe Jacob truly loves you." I smiled. "All right." And then I hung up. She had helped me, but she wasn't my ally. So there was no need to tell her the truth. I simply opened that post titled "Loving a Girl for 10 Years, where a new entry had been added. "I'm getting married to another girl. Let's call her Miss S. Miss S loves me dearly, I'm her whole world, and I can't hurt her. Life is always like this, you can't have both the one you love and the one who loves you. Maybe I'm not brave enough. In the end, I chose the one who loves me." Countless comments scolded him as a jerk, but he seemed to have accepted it, saying nothing. Only one comment stirred him. "What if the girl you love also loves you?" He replied, "I'm tired. I've spent 10 years wondering if she loves me. I don't want to question it anymore, unless..." "Unless what?" "Unless she's willing to be brave for me, just this once." "Forget it, that's never going to happen." The day of the wedding finally arrived as scheduled. Jacob's family had booked the best hotel for the event, and all the guests were high-profile figures. There were even media outlets live-streaming the event, some invited, others just sneaking in to gain attention. Despite the staff clearing the area a few times, people kept hiding in corners, taking photos and filming, no one could control it. I was sitting in the makeup room, wearing a pristine white wedding dress. The makeup artist had just finished touching up my makeup and hair. The MC was pacing frantically. "Where's the groom?" he asked, his voice filled with urgency. "Why hasn't the groom shown up yet? What time is it?" I replied, "I'll call him." I threw on a coat over my wedding dress and ducked out of sight, rushing straight to the roadside. There, a car I had arranged earlier was waiting for me. "Take me to the beach." My Jonas, he grew up by the sea, and the ocean was his favorite thing in the world. So of course, his wedding had to be by the sea. As the car drove away, it passed by another vehicle. I saw Jacob in the other car. But he didn't see me. So, he had really shown up after all. Too bad, it was already too late. Jacob was running into the venue, breathless. He had gotten drunk at the bachelor party the night before, and when he woke up, there were only 15 minutes left before the wedding started. And yet, Cody was still holding him back. "Jacob, didn't you say you were going to leave Ruby hanging?" Jacob rubbed his pounding head, still suffering from the hangover. He had said that, when he was drunk. But he regretted it now. He thought about how Ruby must feel, abandoned at the wedding. She'd probably cry, her eyes turning red like a rabbit's. The thought twisted his heart. With a shove, Jacob pushed Cody aside and told the driver to speed toward the wedding venue. "Ruby." Jacob arrived at the makeup room, but froze. The room was empty. Where's the bride? She just went out. Maybe she's in the front hall? Jacob rushed to the front hall. By now, he had an ominous feeling. Others didn't understand Ruby, but he did. She suffered from anxiety and would never go into the front hall alone with so many people around. But he refused to believe the worst. He reached the front hall and saw a figure in a wedding dress. For a moment, Jacob was overwhelmed with relief and nearly burst into tears. Ruby. But as the figure turned around, Jacob froze. It wasn't Ruby. It was Ella. Ella walked up to Jacob, head held high, like a beautiful, proud swan. Jacob, I'm willing to be brave for you, just this once. She thought she would see Jacob moved by her words. But instead, Jacob took a step back, looking confused and horrified. What are you talking about? Why are you wearing a wedding dress? Where's Ruby? This wasn't what Ella had imagined. She had invited many bloggers to livestream, making it look like they were there to witness Jacob's family wedding, but in reality, she wanted everyone to see that Jacob had left Ruby and chosen her. The more someone insists they don't care about something, the more they actually care about it. Ella, who had spent over 20 years of her life insisting she wasn't like other girls, was in fact obsessed with competing with them. Especially with Ruby. Ruby was Ella's curse, and she needed this public victory to rid herself of the demons that had tormented her for years. Her voice grew sharp, almost uncontrollable. Jacob, I love you. You said that if I was brave just once, you would believe in me. She tried to hug Jacob, but he pulled away. We're just friends, remember? Friends? You've liked me for 10 years. Jacob's eyes were full of horror. Ella was furious. She stormed to the side and grabbed her phone, searching for the post Jacob had written. At that moment, an unfamiliar call came in. Ella almost hung up, but somehow, she accidentally answered. Stop looking. I said with a slight laugh. Even if you find the post, it won't matter. Ruby, why are you calling? Ella started to curse me, but then she froze. Slowly, Ella's body started trembling. You know about the post? Of course I do. I said, smiling. Ella, don't you think about it? Jacob went abroad in high school. After he came back, writing even an essay was a struggle for him. How could he possibly have written a long post like that? Cold sweat poured down Ella's face, ruining her flawless bridal makeup. I spoke softly. That post, I've been writing it from the very beginning. Since the first time I saw Jacob and Ella acting cozy, I started writing that post. At the time, I didn't know she was the one who killed Jonas. I just wanted revenge, for all the hurt she had caused me. Now, it's time. Old scores, new scores, we'll settle them all. This wedding was a gift I prepared for Ella. I'd been planning it for so long. Under the watchful eyes of all the guests, the warm VCR footage on the big screen suddenly disappeared and was replaced by a harsh, looping recording. Dad, help me, I think I've killed someone. Ella's voice, tinged with panic, echoed through the hall. Her face went pale, and she rushed forward, trying to destroy the speakers, but the police who had stormed the venue restrained her. In the audience, Ella's father was ashen. My mother sighed softly, picked up her purse, and left quietly. As Ella was taken away by the police, she desperately lunged toward Jacob. Jacob, please save me, please help me. She grabbed Jacob's pant leg, and Jacob crouched down. Ella's eyes burned with hope. But Jacob only picked up the phone that had fallen to the side. Ruby. Jacob said, his voice hollow. Where are you? I was at the wedding venue. I was at our wedding venue, with Jonas. Before me was the endless sea, and if I was going to marry Jonas, it had to be this way. Step by step, I walked toward the sea. The water reached my ankles, then my calves, my knees, my thighs, my waist. Jacob heard the sound of the waves and screamed. Ruby, Ruby. Don't do something stupid, please? Come back, we can sort everything out. Ruby. I let go of the phone, and it fell into the sea with Jacob's desperate cries. Jonas, I'm coming to find you. Help. Someone was shouting. Jonas, did you hear that? It sounds like someone is calling for help. In the water, I had no sense of direction. I swallowed a lot of seawater before I saw a small, orange life buoy. It was a little girl, clinging tightly to the buoy, about to be swept away by the waves. "Jonas, help her, quick!" I shouted, swimming with all my strength, reaching the girl, and pushing her toward the nearest rocks. I was so tired. "Jonas, help me, I can't push anymore." It felt like Jonas was really helping me. The sea lifted me, and the waves carried us toward the rocks. Finally, I managed to push the little girl onto the rocks. She screamed, "Sister! Sister, get up here!" But I had no strength left. The waves gently wrapped around me. "Jonas, I'm coming to find you." I thought when I woke up, I would see Jonas's face. But instead, I saw a man wearing a white mask. He said, "The patient's vital signs are stable, but the case shows a history of depression. Family members must take extra care. If there are any signs of suicidal thoughts, please call this number immediately." A little girl threw herself onto me. "Sister." I lowered my eyes, defeated. I didn't live a happy life. "Jonas is angry with me, he won't see me." The girl's parents approached. They seemed like a refined middle-aged couple. They expressed their gratitude, but I was deaf to their words. Until the wife hesitated and asked, "Are you Jonas's girlfriend?" I froze. It felt like a foreign label. Jonas had been dead for years. I thought no one else remembered him. "I guess so," the wife said, smiling at her husband. The little girl cheered. "I knew it. I knew I heard someone calling Jonas in the water." This couple told me that back then, they were employees of Jonas' father's company. When his wife was pregnant, her water broke, and in the middle of the night, they couldn't get a taxi. Jonas heard and immediately stepped on the gas to rush over. "I remember it clearly," the wife said with a smile. "There was a little rabbit in the passenger seat, holding a photo of the two of you. I was in so much pain at that time." Mr. Jonas, in an attempt to distract me, kept saying, look at my girlfriend, isn't she beautiful?" I laughed, tears falling. That's exactly him, showing off his love no matter the situation. It's so annoying, and I told him many times not to do that. The wife's eyes turned red. I told him, "She's so beautiful, you must cherish her." He said, cherish her, I'll propose right away." A month later, Jonas died in a car accident. A year later, I met Jacob and soon discovered that he was Ella's friend. Fate twisted and turned, bringing all of us along for the ride. I moved in with the little girl. Her father had also started his own business over the years and bought a seaside villa. The couple said, "Back then, Mr. Jonas saved Ivy once, and you saved her once. It's fate. You can stay as long as you like." The little girl, named Ivy, didn't know why, but she was especially close to me. Even though she had her own room, she would always come to find me to sleep together. During the day, her parents were out working, and I was the only one at home with her. Sometimes we went to the beach to dig for crabs, other times we built sandcastles. One day, it rained heavily by the sea, and we couldn't go out to play, so we stayed inside and watched the rain. She pointed at the water stains on the window. "Does this look like a puppy?" "It does." "This one looks like a pig." "No, it looks like a cat." "What about this one?" "It looks like a tall, handsome man, doesn't it?" "Is that Jonas, brother?" I laughed and said, "It really does." Suddenly, Ivy exclaimed, "Hey, a rabbit!" I followed her gaze. It was Jacob. He stood in the pouring rain, holding a new rabbit. He didn't know how long he had been standing there, soaked to the bone. I walked out, and he looked at me, giving a bitter smile. He said, "Ella told me everything. She didn't flee the scene, she intentionally murdered him. The reason she killed him was because she loved Jonas. But Jonas loved me." Ella never expected this tragedy to repeat itself with Jacob. She couldn't believe it, and, through the thick glass, she asked Jacob, "Dare you say you've never loved me? How could you never have loved me?" Jacob paused, then laughed sarcastically. "Ella, we both know what kind of people we are, don't we? A flirtatious woman, a playboy." Both of them were so good at enjoying the kind of ambiguous relationship that was neither here nor there, hugging and kissing casually, then claiming afterward that they were just friends. Kissing 1,000 people with their lips, but their hearts remained unmoved. I just didn't expect that I would be so unable to let Ruby go, Jacob said softly. If I had known earlier, I would have personally sent you to prison. These words shattered Ella completely. She screamed, "You love Ruby? Then ask Ruby if she loves you." Jacob, you've been deceived. She approached you just to get back at me. The one she loves is Jonas. At this moment, in the rainstorm, Jacob looked at me. I can pretend I don't know. Ruby, let's go home. I can pretend I don't know Jonas, pretend nothing ever happened, as long as you come home with me. He tried to walk toward me. But I took a step back. Sorry, Jacob, I can't pretend. He suddenly started crying. Why? Aren't you good at pretending? Jacob's eyes were red in the rain. You never loved me, but you could pretend so well. Why can't you do it now? Is it because I'm no longer useful to you? Ella isn't even dead yet. Jacob had no strength left. He bent down, the rain pounding his back, and he sank to the ground, kneeling. Maybe it wasn't love. Maybe it was just unwillingness. He told himself. He couldn't accept that Ruby had never loved him, so he tried everything to bring her back to him. To make her love him, then take revenge on her. After all, she had always been using him. His thoughts were a mess, and when Jacob looked up again, all he could see was Ruby's back. The wind carried her final words to Jacob. Go look at the rabbit I returned to you. The answer you care about is all in that rabbit. Jacob, soaked to the bone, returned home. He didn't bother to change clothes and immediately grabbed the rabbit sitting on the sofa. After a long while, he found a letter inside the rabbit's spacesuit. It was Ruby's familiar handwriting. The letter was addressed to Jonas. Jonas? It's been a long time since I wrote to you, but today, there's something very important I need to tell you. I met someone, maybe it's fate, his name is similar to yours. But this person is nothing like you. You're like a little dog, and he's like a little cat. He's irritable, proud, and easily upset. But if you smooth his fur, he'll roll over in the sun and purr at you. He treats me very well. When I'm sick, he comes back right away to keep me company. He doesn't even know how to turn on a gas stove, but when I said I wanted to eat his cooking, he started learning. He cut his hand trying to chop vegetables, burned his foot trying to blanch something. He's gotten hurt a lot, but finally, he can make scrambled eggs with tomatoes that are edible. He's very proud, saying he'll learn more dishes to cook for me in the future. Jonas, I love him very much. I want to be with him and spend my life happily with him. If you don't approve, give me a dream, and I'll continue to tell you about him in my dream. The letter was dated 6 months ago. It turns out that back then, she really loved him. She wasn't anyone's replacement. She was truly trying to move on from her past pain, trying to make room in her heart for him. She couldn't have done it any better. The one who didn't do well was him. He was the one who let her go. That day, after the storm, the sky was clear yet cruel. A man in a suit, soaked to the bone, collapsed in despair, holding a rabbit and crying uncontrollably. In winter, Ivy and I went on a trip. She was very excited, being a child from the south, she had never seen snow, and we had a snowball fight for a long time. After we returned to the hotel, she kept staring at the snowman outside the window, unwilling to leave. After I finished my hot shower and came out, I saw her pointing downstairs. There are 2 snowmen. I looked down. One of the snowmen was Jacob. He was kneeling in the endless white, snow covering him completely, and he didn't move at all. I lowered my eyes and closed the curtains. Will you forgive him? Ivy asked. She was too young to understand what had happened, but she vaguely sensed it was a story of love and rejection. Do you like your desk mate? I asked. Her face turned red. I don't like him. Why? I teased her. Because he made me cry, Ivy said angrily. I smiled and hugged her. That's right. Someone who truly loves you wouldn't want you to suffer the slightest bit. So, someone who makes you cry, we shouldn't like them. What if I can't find someone who truly loves me? Ivy said, deep in thought. It's okay, I said softly. Then love yourself and love the world. Jonas. I once thought no one would be like you again. But now I understand. The wind is you, the clouds are you, the flowers are you, even a small hermit crab is you. I will be happy. As long as I'm with you. End.